Hi, welcome back. What do you look for when you install a new gacha game? Are you looking for characters, gameplay, or story? Ever since the release of Genshin Impact, most gacha game releases began to provide a great experience with all of these aspects. The quality and standard were raised with this game, and now when you create an inferior product, it fails. In most cases, when a gacha game releases, it is very cut and clear who likes it and who doesn't. Wuthering Waves was formed by only a few Kuro communities coming from games like Punishing Grey Raven, while a massive portion of its player base most definitely came from disgruntled Genshin Impact players that just wanted a better product. While you might look at these two very distinct communities that really hate each other and think that Wuthering Waves is a divisive game, there is one that's even going to be more divisive. Lines are going to be drawn all over the place, resulting in Arknights Endfield becoming the most divisive gacha game to ever release so far. Just before we jump into the content, I've got something I want to talk to you about. Creating these videos over the past 2 years has been super fun, but it's also a lot of work. So help me make more content for you by checking out Raid Shadow Legends. I'm sure you all know about it at this point. It's a fun fantasy-themed turn-based RPG game, all about collecting characters and fighting powerful enemies. It's got all the RPG game essentials, tons of amazing gameplay, and incredibly fleshed out endgame content. So, if you're a fan of this stuff, you're going to love it. You'll also get rewards valued at more than $200 by downloading it using my link in the description and the pinned comment. It's free, you won't regret it, and I would really appreciate it. Now let's get on to the content. In this video, I want to talk about how and why Endfield will be so divisive. I will be using a concept I've just made up called line drawing. Every time we conclude a reason for a massive portion of the player base to complain, a line will be drawn. Then I want to talk about the implications of this divisiveness when it comes to community and game development. Finally, I also want to give you my thoughts about the game so far, as the beta has almost concluded and it's about time I do a review. So Arknights Endfield is obviously a sequel to Arknights, and it's a sequel in every way. It's the same universe, the same timeline, even some of the exact same characters. The only difference is we're hundreds of years into the future, and it's an action RPG instead of a real-time strategy tower defense game. One of the biggest reasons it's going to be divisive is that it takes after Arknights a lot. While a lot of people may, at first glance, see that this is an action RPG gacha game and think they're obviously capitalizing upon Genshin's success, but they couldn't be more wrong. While games like Wuthering Waves are incredibly similar to Genshin Impact to the point where it's probably impossible to claim that Kuro games didn't take insanely heavy inspiration, Endfield's case is completely different. Also, by the way, I'm not attacking Kuro games for this. Wuthering Waves is a completely superior product to Genshin Impact in every way. They did the open world action RPG formula 1,000 times better. Anyways, how is Endfield more similar to Arknights than its actual competitors? Well, first of all, if you're going to copy your competitors, you better do things better than them. This is why Wuthering Waves is such a massive success. It is doing so many things better than Genshin Impact, such as generosity, combat quality, and the gacha system. Meanwhile, things like Endfield's gacha system are only very debatably better than games like Genshin and Wuwa. While I personally think it's a better system for many reasons that I have listed in this video right here, everything is still very debatable either way. This gacha system is not perfect. It lacks the 50-50 guarantee that many players are used to. The 126-star guarantee also doesn't carry over, which again, a lot of players don't really like. This is already one line drawn that separates Wuwa and Genshin players from Endfield. The system is a lot more like Arknights' system, where the only guarantee to get the on-banner unit that you want is going above 150 pulls. If you're in dedicated Arknights spaces, you'll find a lot of players really don't mind this at all. A lot of Arknights players will tell you that if you just spend mindfully instead of pulling willy-nilly, you'll get what you want, and I'm inclined to agree, and I do think that the Endfield situation will be the same. This game also doesn't give out rewards like Genshin and Wuwa. For example, achievements are completely optional and don't give Oro Barrel, just like in Arknights. Umbral Monument, one of Endfield's endgame modes we already have in the beta, doesn't give much either. This is just like Arknights, where the endgame does not really give gacha currency, and also fun fact, like most endgame content in the Battle Cats. A lot of Genshin, Wuwa, HSR, and ZZZ players will see this and think it's predatory because you end up with less rewards, but this is obviously a good thing because when you're not incentivized to pull the newest units because you need the 800 or so Stellar Jade locked behind the MOC, the devs are no longer incentivized to do things like power creep and HP inflation, and there's also way less FOMO surrounding the endgame content. That's sort of another line drawn because of unfamiliarity, but this could also serve as a line erased for some players, where they'll want to try out something new instead of the exact same formula they've tried out before. So this will depend on the open-mindedness of each player. Do you remember when Honkai Star Rail first came out? All the Genshin could never stuff, which in hindsight was really stupid because it's the same company, Well, the communities did eventually realize this, and now you'll barely find any HSR or Genshin players hating on each other. Instead, they'll hate on Wuthering Waves, probably. For a while, Honkai Star Rail itself was very divisive in the way that it created a further split. Remember how Wuthering Waves and Genshin's community split and began hating each other? Well, when you throw Honkai Star Rail discussions into the mix, you create a much more hostile and tribalistic environment. However, this was shut down when HSR and Genshin players obviously realized that in the end, they are one and the same. As a result, instead of a three-way tribal war, it became a Kuro versus Hoyo thing. But now, Endfield will also be thrown into the mix, but not just that. Because Arknights over the past year or so has already been getting a lot of traction on the internet, with the Arknights Glaze movement specifically, and with Endfield on top of that, Hypergriff as a whole is going to enter this discussion. And that itself is a huge reason as to why I'm saying this game is going to be so divisive. Apart from being so different, it is also going to become a third competitor for the biggest open-world gacha game in the space, and Hypergriff is going to become a competitor for the biggest gacha company in the space, and will put them in the spotlight, or the low light, if you will. This will draw further lines between communities, leading to even more tribalism and drama. What's more, this game is going to be different enough to where, depending on how successful it is, companies will look into copying it instead of Genshin. These companies are also very aware of the criticisms that are thrown towards games like Genshin. For example, Ethereal Restart released with no 50-50 for characters. If that doesn't tell you they know players are starting to get fed up with it, I don't know what will. If they see praise and glaze getting thrown at Endfield, then they will copy this game instead. For better or for worse, depending on its success, this game is going to probably set a new standard. I want to take a moment and ask you why you think HSR, ZZZ, and Wuthering Waves, despite being so successful, haven't done that themselves. Well, the answer is quite obvious. While they are better games than Genshin in so many ways, they also didn't do things differently enough to where outsider companies looking to create new gacha games take notice and develop accordingly. A prospective gacha company CEO isn't going to look at Genshin and Wuwa and say, I need to copy Wuwa more than Genshin, because what they see is that 1. Genshin makes more money, and 2. Wuthering Waves has so far won the same awards. However, Endfield does things differently enough to where games can either follow Genshin standards or Endfield's. But to be honest, while this is another line drawn that will differentiate between games from the last 6 years and games after, it is also pretty damn speculatory, mostly because we don't know how successful Endfield will be, and we don't know how gacha company CEOs actually think. Another point is that Arknights players are also complaining about Endfield. Their biggest issue with this game is the way limited and standard units work. In Arknights, most units come out in their own banner. Then they become standard units. Meanwhile, limited units only come out during events like anniversaries and Chinese New Year. Now, it's an oversimplification, but it's basically how this works. These limited units only rerun during the events they were released with. Arknights players expected Endfield to operate the same. Meanwhile, it's planning on doing the rerun system how Genshin does it. So, while it's doing most business how Arknights does it, it is at least doing this rerun system like the newer age gacha games, meaning there is also divisiveness in the Arknights community itself about this game, which is of course another line drawn. So, concluding this section, Endfield does things differently enough to where if it is successful enough, it is going to influence the production of newer games and will influence its competition through things it does objectively better. And there are a lot of things it does objectively better that I will talk about right now. The biggest and most obvious things Endfield does better than other games is the gear and weapon acquisition systems. Gear is not RNG like other games and is instead infinitely farmable and craftable. All you have to do is set up your AIC, get enough stock bills, and you're good to start crafting gear. Weapon Gacha is also free, and while you currently can't guarantee every 6-star weapon through Gacha only, especially because it seems like limited weapons won't be purchasable, which is super f***ing ass, but it's still better and cheaper than every other system. Although, don't get me wrong, the fact that the game soft punishes you for getting lucky by not leaving you with enough arsenal tickets to get your 6-star operator's weapon, on top of signature weapons being pretty damn good, is an issue. Although it can easily be fixed by 1. Adjusting the weapon gacha to reduce its requirements, 2. Creating modes that reward you with arsenal tickets, or 3. Making limited weapons purchasable, or all 3 at the same time. Now, there is an infinite farm loop you can sink your teeth into if you are addicted to the gear grind, which are the weapon essences. While this is technically an RNG gear system, it has half if not a third of the RNG steps that gear in other games has. You just have to get the 3 attributes of each essence that match the weapon you want to equip, and then you can upgrade them. There is no level up rolling and there are no ranges. It is the perfect RNG gear system that incentivizes daily play without completely sucking the life out of you. There is a set, obvious, and non-arbitrary finish line that you can aim for, unlike other games where you can always get like 2 more speed or 3 more crit damage or whatever. That finish line is simply getting a weapon essence that matches your weapon's attribute and is leveled up to max. Now there's also gear artificing, which basically works the exact same way as weapon essences except for gear. Now honestly, I'm still not the biggest fan of the gear artificing system, only the crafting part, though it is still overall a much better system than most other games and won't lead to that much suffering in the end. Although I used to think I liked the AIC gear crafting more than every other game because it was infinitely farmable and craftable, because of the gear artificing system being heavily RNG, I have gone back to preferring games like Battlecats and Arknights that don't have RNG in the character building. Aside from these systems, I also absolutely love the rest of the game. The exploration combines with the AIC factory super well, and it by far creates the best exploration experience out of the big open world games for me. The visuals are super beautiful, the details are insane, and the performance is super smooth. Now, the story, while it isn't the most revolutionary, is still definitely a great experience. I do definitely enjoy it more than any of the other 1.0 and 1.1 stories of any other gacha game, but not necessarily because of the story being told, but how it is told. The characters' facial expressions, animations, dialogue interactions, and everything else is absolutely impeccable. And Yvonne's introduction is by far my favorite introduction of any gacha character ever. And finally, the combat is incredibly fun. I've never had this much fun actually playing an open world game like this, and I would even say I enjoy this combat more than Battlecats, and that is saying something huge. While you might look at the element system and think, oh, it's just like Genshin where you apply elements to interact with each other. That's completely incorrect because that's not how it works. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're playing a turn-based action RPG game. That is the best way to describe this, because at all times, you are both strategizing like you would in a turn-based game based on how to use up the skill points you currently have, and dodging around and moving based on what the enemies are doing in real time. Now this game is ready for the January 22nd release, and the only thing that will really mess up the release date is if they pull a Stella Sora or something, or if they don't have enough events going. While it is ready, it is also not perfect. I've said this before, it is fine for the January 22nd release, although I do believe that it would have been so much better for the game as a whole if that date was instead an actual open beta and not a Chinese game development proverb, with maybe the actual release date closer to the end of February and March. Either way, I couldn't be more excited for this game, and you bet your ass I'm going to glaze it unless they mess up. In that case, I will be as harsh as I can, because I don't want this game to end up like Honkai Star Rail. So that's everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Expression Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with. Make sure to check out Raid Shadow Legends using my link in the description and pinned comment to get $200 worth of free goodies. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.